Hey everyone, this is Deacon Andy. I am back with our second episode of Pius Presents, and today I'm talking to Father Ruben Buller. He is the Director of Liturgy for the Diocese of Lake Charles. Father, it's good to be with you.
All right, thank you, Andy. It's good to be with you too, sir.
I always love talking to you. I think that
Thank you.
you've got a good head on your shoulders. So we're going into Holy Week. This is day one, and what I'm looking forward to, it comes towards the end of the week. It's called Triduum. Can you maybe briefly explain what Triduum is?
Sure. So Triduum, it actually comes from the Latin for 3 days, and it begins on Holy Thursday night when the church celebrates the institution of the Eucharist and also the institution of the priesthood that our Lord did at the Last Supper, and especially telling the disciples to carry on that celebration of the Eucharist each time they gathered for Mass and they celebrated Mass. And then it continues to the second day, Good Friday, where the church remembers and celebrates as well the passion and the death of our Lord. And then finally, on Holy Saturday and extending into the evening for the Easter Vigil as well, the church finds herself on Holy Saturday in a day of waiting, just like the apostles and the disciples gathered, and they were waiting for the fulfillment of the promise of Jesus. And we wait and we keep vigil all night until finally in the morning, the last day of the Triduum, with Mary Magdalene and the other Mary and Joanna and all of these other women, we joyfully greet the risen Lord, and we hear his proclamation that he is risen and that we're not to be afraid. And so in essence, that's what the Triduum is. And it's the high point, the most important point of the church's year as well. So.
Oh, very good. So, in terms of the entire year, liturgically, we're talking about some of the most important liturgies of the entire year.
Right.
And what's different about this year is that, for the most part, it's going to be pretty private. Priests are still going to be celebrating these liturgies either in their parishes alone, live streamed, in some cases in their rectories. What are
Right.
you most going to miss this year about the Triduum liturgies?
Yeah. And I think maybe not to correct you, but just to kind of point out something too. We wouldn't say that they're private. I think what we would say is that they're without a congregation present that we can see, because nothing that the church does is private. Everything that the church does takes place with the entire communion of the church who is suffering here on earth, the church that is suffering in purgatory, and the church triumphant as well. So it's definitely going to be a public event. Mm-hmm. But that also leads me to what I'm going to miss most, and that is to have a congregation to share the Triduum with, to actually see the Christian faithful who are present, who are with us in this moment where the church does proclaim her faith and the redemption of our Lord's redeeming death, and also joyfully waits his resurrection, and then really does rejoice. And that the moment that always, I think it hits home for me, is in the middle of, or really not the middle, but the beginning of the Easter Vigil, where we have the Exultet, and it still is dark in the church, and we hear the Exultet being sung, and we hear that command that the deacon sings, rejoice, and how we should be looking. And this is the night where the church is triumphant, not because of ourselves, but because of the victory of Jesus Christ and his resurrection. And for us to be in a place without a congregation physically with us, I think is going to be the most difficult part for me for this Triduum.
I think you're right. It definitely will be for me as well. But speaking about this rejoicing, that is so much a part of the Easter that we look forward to and that we celebrate. it's a little bit different this year because, for those of us that are isolated in our homes, there isn't really a physical shift from Lent into Triduum into Easter. For most of us that are at home, we're kind of still just at home. How
Right.
how is that Easter joy? How is that supposed to be expressed in these days?
I think, Deacon, that we as the church right now and members of the church, we're going to be entering into a point where we can really understand the first Triduum and the first Easter in a way that unless we were there, it would be very difficult. And what I mean by that, just like you were saying, it is a time of rejoicing, it's a time of fulfillment. But at the same time, what's incredible is when we look at the apostles and the disciples, what we hear about at the end of the Gospels and in the beginning of the Acts of the Apostles is that all of that joy did not just, as it were, explode into all of the members of the church. They actually waited for 50 more days. And I think that's what the church is going to be doing. And all the Christian faithful are going to continue in that. We're going to be a church of waiting and the cynical with our Blessed Mother, trying to understand the mystery of Jesus's death and his resurrection and our own little passion, as that were, in this isolation. Because after all, there's a lot that we can learn in this time. I think a greater gratitude for the sacraments. I think for those of us who are ministers, one of the things that I've learned is to be more grateful to the people who are present at Mass, and not to look for the little things that annoy me all the time, but rather to just rejoice that people are there. All of these things, I think, are going to be fruits, but it only comes about in that cynical of waiting, where we're still in the upper room. And finally, when Pentecost comes and we're able to enter our churches again, I think then we'll understand why the Lord put us in this time.
Very good, Father. It is so good to talk to you again.
Well, thank you, Deacon.
I hope
Yeah,
to see you soon. I know we all are looking forward to that time where we can all be back in the churches
sure.
again. But for the time being, stay safe and stay holy. And for all of you who have joined us today to listen, thank you for tuning in. And we look forward to seeing you again on another episode of Pius Presents. Take care.